Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We're taking an objective, deeply analytical look at two of the most complex, intensely compared nations on Earth, India and Pakistan. We'll be pulling from a wide mix of academic research, macroeconomic data, and actual on-the-ground traveler observations to paint a really complete picture for you. So let's get right to it.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Shared routes, divergent paths. 2. The macroeconomic divide. 3. On-the-ground realities. 4. Culture, cuisine, and hospitality. And finally, 5. Looking to the future. We're going to start from a 30,000-foot historical view and zoom all the way down to the street level of daily life. Section 1. Shared routes, divergent paths.
So let's rewind back to 1947. Despite having a shared origin point and basically the exact same cultural context at the time, the political and structural paths of these two nations separated almost immediately. India adopted its constitution early on, in 1950, which paved the way for continuous democratic stability. Pakistan, on the other hand, experienced some significant delays. They adopted their first constitution in 1956 and unfortunately entered a cycle of military rule pretty shortly after, with their first martial law kicking in by 1958.
There's this really fascinating comparative analysis from Bahauddin Zakaria University, and it points out a crucial, often overlooked fact. Both nations essentially had to start completely from scratch, facing enormous foundational challenges. Back in 1947, both were heavily agrarian, extremely rural economies with incredibly low initial literacy rates. Neither had any real prior experience with independent democratic governance. It was literally like building a nation on hard mode.
And this brilliantly illustrates the deep socio-political structures that have historically restricted socioeconomic mobility in both countries. On the Indian side, you've got the historical caste system, a graded social division tied back to ancient religious practices. Then, over on the Pakistani side, you have the jagirdari, or feudal system, where these massive landholdings grant significant power to rural medieval proprietors. Both systems are wildly different, right? But historically, both have created substantial challenges when it comes to equal resource distribution.
Section 2. The macroeconomic divide.
All right, shifting gears to the macroeconomy. We're looking at data compiled from regional observers and academic sources here, and the absolute most crucial takeaway is the sheer difference in scale. We're looking at India's GDP reported at $2.47 trillion, which is heavily driven by a massive service and IT sector. Compare that to Pakistan's $228 billion, an economy that relies much more heavily on agriculture. You can also see vast differences in foreign reserves and adult literacy rates, which directly reflect the very different economic trajectories these nations have charted over the decades. And this economic disparity carries right over into their global corporate footprints, and even into athletic history. India currently has 7 companies listed in the Fortune 500, while Pakistan doesn't have any right now. In the sporting arena, India holds 28 total Olympic medals to Pakistan's 10. In fact, Pakistan hasn't taken home an Olympic medal since the 1992 Barcelona Games. 90,000. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the record number of Pakistani prisoners of war taken by the Indian Army during the 1971 war. This was an absolutely defining historical moment for the subcontinent, one that ultimately led to the creation of Bangladesh and drastically reshaped modern borders and regional geopolitics forever.
Section 3. On-the-ground realities. Let's move to and see how this builds when we step entirely away from the macroeconomic data and drop straight down to the traveler's micro perspective on the street. First up, we've got to debunk some major travel misconceptions. A Western traveler chronicled an extensive journey through both countries and found his initial fears were totally unfounded. Pakistan, which is often portrayed pretty dangerously in the West, actually felt incredibly safe and welcoming for a solo traveler. And as for India, despite the infamous reputation of its street food, he didn't get sick a single time eating from street vendors. The irony? His only bout of food sickness came from a buffet at a fancy 5-star hotel. No way, right? Now, from a practical standpoint, how do you actually get around and pay for things? Well, in India, that macroeconomic IT boom we talked about earlier, you can literally see it on the street. It is a highly cashless society. There are QR codes everywhere. The metro systems in major cities are incredibly efficient, and Uber works absolutely flawlessly. But catch this. As a foreigner, you currently can't easily access those QR codes. Over in Pakistan, it's a totally different story. It's a much more cash-heavy society. Locals prefer an app called InDrive instead of Uber, and foreigners face severe, almost daily challenges just trying to get ATMs to accept international cards.
On the topic of day-to-day cleanliness, the traveler made some very candid, neutral observations. He noted that Pakistan generally felt noticeably cleaner on the streets. He specifically pointed out that Islamabad was absolutely spotless, and Pakistani street food stalls frequently used tongs and wiped down their surfaces. In India, he observed more flies around the food, noted that vendors frequently used their bare hands to serve, and mentioned a pretty prevalent street spitting culture.
Section 4. Culture, Cuisine, and Hospitality.
All right, this brings us to the most sensory part of our explainer, and the contrast here is just absolutely fascinating. India's greatest strength is its immense, almost overwhelming diversity. Moving from city to city is literally like traveling through 20 different countries, complete with entirely different languages, traditions, and cuisines. Pakistan, while having less of that extreme regional variation, possesses something else: unmatched, mind-blowing hospitality. The traveler noted that a staggering 50% of taxi drivers in Pakistan actually refused his money, just out of sheer generosity to a guest. In India, interactions on the street were much more frequently geared toward commerce. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how a shared love for chai perfectly highlights these subtle cultural differences. In India, the tea culture is very fast-paced. You grab a tiny, highly affordable paper cup of chai for about 10 rupees, knock it back, and keep moving. In Pakistan, the presentation is slightly more elevated. It's usually served in larger glass cups, costs just a little bit more, but offers a more seated, aesthetic experience.
Oh, and the food. If you are taking notes for a future trip, you're going to want to write these down. In India, Bangalore's crispy dosas paired with filtered coffee for breakfast were ranked as top tier, right alongside the melt-in-your-mouth, gooey jalebis found on the vibrant streets of Delhi. Meanwhile, across the border in Pakistan, Karachi offered a rich, slow-cooked beef nahari that was apparently out of this world, while Lahore delivered the best dessert of the entire trip, sizzling hot gulab jamun served right off the charcoal.
Section 5. Looking to the future.
As we wrap up this comparative journey, what do the sources actually suggest both countries need to do to improve the experience for visitors and locals alike? The actionable takeaways are pretty clear. For India, the primary goal should really be opening up that incredible QR payment network to international visitors, finding some way to curb the excessive street honking, and cracking down on the street scams that occasionally target tourists. For Pakistan, the absolute immediate priority is fixing the ATM infrastructure so international cards work reliably, improving their slow intercity transit systems, and doing a better job promoting their beautiful tourism regions beyond just the northern mountains. So, what does this all mean? I want to leave you with a provocative question to ponder. We've seen India's massive economic scale and stunning technological leaps, and we've contrasted that directly with Pakistan's unmatched ground-level hospitality and spotless streets. So, which path defines a nation's true progress? Is it macroeconomic scale on the global stage, or is it the daily hospitality and lived experience right there on its streets? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. I really hope this provided a fresh lens through which to view these two incredible nations. See you next time.